Can you use detail planks to speedrun Raft? Hi friends, and welcome back to Raft. Every time I mention speedrunning on any of my channels, inevitably some commenter will ask me, why don't you just use the detail plank to speedrun Raft? Referencing the infamous Let's Game It Out video, wherein Josh demonstrates just how broken the detail plank is. But does just how broken the detail plank is make it a viable speedrunning tool? This video is to answer all of those questions once and for all. First, we need to lay out some ground rules. I'll be running in the easy difficulty. This is because hunger and thirst decay slowest in easy compared to other runnable difficulties, Jeremiah attacks the raft less frequently, and we have the major advantage of not losing items when Jeremiah does his chomping, which is a massive boost to our time, mostly because we can swim and not worry about perishing for most things because it's not too much of a punishment. Easy is consistently the fastest category of Raft speedruns for those reasons, but to give the detail plank any fighting chance of coming close to any of those times, I'll be comparing the final speedrun time to a hard difficulty run, which is consistently the slowest category. I feel like this is a good time to mention that I currently have 4 individual Raft world record speedruns, with another co-op world record and 1 more co-op second place run. So yes, I do know how to speedrun Raft, and it's my own times and splits I'll be comparing against. Beyond the change in difficulty, where we're running in easy but using splits from hard, very little about the speedrun itself is changing. Anywhere I would typically use another building-related technique to speedrun a story location has to be replaced with a detail plank. Again, to give the detail plank a fighting chance, anytime we wouldn't normally require a building of any sort to speedrun a location, I won't use detail planks because it would unfairly disadvantage the run. Beyond that, I'll explain each speedrun technique and strategy as we go, so let's load into our brand new easy world and get running. For the first part of this run, we'll be using completely normal speed strats because we aren't able to unlock the detail plank until we get tier 3 trading at the trading posts on large islands. Regardless of other comments I've gotten saying that there are other ways to unlock the detail plank, no there aren't. Blueprints are a set thing in this game. The detail plank can only be found at trading posts as a tier 3 trade. Trading posts are only found on large islands, and large islands don't start spawning until you've played a given save file for 30 minutes. That means we have a bare minimum of 30 minutes to try and gather as many resources as possible. Our first priority is getting to the first island so we can set down 2 smelters. I'll start with a classic death bait to drag Jeremiah away from my raft and out of the normal aggro radius in the opposite direction than the raft is heading, so that when Jeremiah does eventually get to me, I can then respawn back on my raft while Jeremiah is still super far away, and then dolphin jump my way over to the first island to get there roughly 2 minutes early when compared to idly drifting. On my way, I make sure to flip my camera around and grab extra resources out of the water, because we'll need those later. But for now, my focus is on getting the resources for the 2 smelters. We care about getting the smelters down so quickly because in a traditional speedrun, obtaining the right ratios of second-tier smelted resources is key for getting a decent time, and we won't be treating this run any differently. That means that we need to get a total of 26 sand and clay ASAP. I rerolled saves until I got one of my preferred starting islands, one that I've specifically nicknamed Good Island because it has ample sand and clay to get those smelters down. So we gather up enough sediment to craft 13 wet bricks, and then start the 5-minute drying timer while we gather up the rest of the copper, metal, and scrap we can get our grubby little hands on. Notably, while I would normally only grab a total of 9 seaweed throughout the entire course of this run, I will specifically be grabbing extra whenever I can to help us later on for the detail plank. With our first island harvested and our raft on its merry little way, we continue with this run normally, placing down our smelters right at the 14-minute mark, which is a pretty good start for a fast run and about 10 minutes ahead of my hard world record split. From here, I'm trying to optimize my movements to collect as many resources as possible. Since we're playing in easy, the most efficient method for collecting large volumes of flotsam is something we like to call front looting, where essentially I want to be at the front of the trash stream, picking up any debris as it spawns. I don't have to worry about Jeremiah because I don't lose inventory when I perish, and this helps me regularly check on my smelters to cycle the resources as necessary. This will help me gather resources much faster than I could with a hook, and it means that I don't have to waste resources on collection nets, since goodness knows we'll need to save our planks for detail planks later on. At this point, I am only visiting small islands to try and gather extra metal and copper, as well as any extra seaweed I can grab. We don't unlock the recycler until we've reached the radio tower, so there's no point in me wasting time by heading to large islands right now. After around another 20 minutes or so, we finally have enough copper and other resources to place our receiver and antenna, which I'm doing in my traditional speedrun layout. That points us towards the first story location, the radio tower. Because this island doesn't require any building mechanics to speedrun, I'll do a similar technique to what I did at the start of the run, where I intentionally bait Jeremiah far behind the raft, let myself perish, then use that extra distance to get a leg ahead by swimming to the radio tower. This island is simple, both to play casually and for speed strats. The only differences for the speedrun route is that instead of walking around the outside of the second tier, we jump onto the lamp hanging onto the side of the building for immediate height, and instead of climbing the boxes for the last jump, we instead jump off of the rungs of the tower itself to reach the stairway faster. With that, we're at the top of the tower where we can grab the code for the Vasagaton and the blueprint for the recycler, which is where we start to alter this route to account for needing detail planks. Technically, we won't need them until we reach the 4th story island, but we'll need to visit a bare minimum of 2 separate trading posts at least 4 total times to get all of the bait necessary to raise our reputation to tier 3, which is where the blueprint for the detail plank is housed. To do that as quickly as possible, I first need to place the recycler on my raft and shove it full of all of the excess seaweed I've been gathering when visiting islands during the first part of this run. It takes 15 seaweed to make 1 trash cube, and we need a grand total of 22 trash cubes to purchase all of the necessary trading bait and eventually the detail plank blueprint. That means dumping all of my excess resources into the recycler whenever I can. That includes the one viable use for the giant clams that I've also been picking up along the way. All this time, my raft has been floating in the direction of the 2nd story island. I checked the receiver after getting my first round of trash cubes to check for any nearby large islands where I could potentially buy my first round of bait. There aren't any on the horizon within a reasonable distance in my direction of travel, so I'm instead going to rush the ship island so we can get ahead of the timer even further. That means baiting Jeremiah behind the raft to do another aggro reset, then dolphin jumping all the way to the story island. This location is actually my favorite for speedrun routing, because I think the way the camera manipulation and movement work together is the best example of what speed tech is actually possible in Raft. There's the normal movement of jumping to open the door and running around the outside to jump up onto the balcony to access that door. Then comes the camera manipulation technique that we'll use for the rest of the run. This technique involves using third-person perspective, which is currently unavailable on consoles, I know, to separate the camera from the player. The doors on the yacht are typically locked on the outside, and you're supposed to only be able to open them from inside of the boat. But because my player model is inside the boat, I can detach my camera, point it at a door on the next level above me where I'm trying to go, and open it that way, negating all of the internal puzzles. Then I just repeat this technique while jumping up to the next level around the outside of the boat to fully complete the story island in just about 45 seconds. No building required. So with the code in hand, we're on our way to Balboa Island. Once again, no building is used to beat this large island. Just some good map knowledge and a few special tricks. We'll swim there like we have for the other locations. The reason for swimming instead of bringing my raft with me is that I can dolphin jump like this at an average pace of roughly 5 meters per second. I do this by using a glitch that essentially lets me stay above the water to sprint instead of swimming, which is slower at about 3 meters per second. That 3 meters per second of static swimming is still twice as fast as my raft moves though, because the raft travels at a static pace of 1.5 meters per second in the direction of the wind. So that's why I swim to all of these locations when I need to travel more than 1,500 meters at a time. That speed adds up quickly. Importantly, this is also cutting some heavy time off of our splits, because you can't do this easily in hard difficulty. So this is giving the run a substantial leg up on the time we are comparing to. But with Balboa in sight, it's time for my second favorite island to speedrun. Once we hit land, I stand still for 30 seconds until the Unstuck button appears in my pause menu. That teleports me to a set location on the South Beach, which is the perfect place to start my routing from. The Balboa speedrun showcases the other main aspect of good running. Where the Vasagaton relied more on mechanics, Balboa relies more on routing by doing things like jumping up this cliff so I can fall into Mama Bear's cave to avoid her aggro, pick up the machete box, and run out with minimal worry. Then I start my way to the 2 raised towers. Again, this mostly relies on good map knowledge and routing to be successful, but with a bit of practice, it's pretty easy to do. Then we just climb our first tower to power our first lever, and immediately head to the next tower. This one requires the machete to chop through the vines, which is why we made a pit stop at Mama Bear's cave earlier. The only fancy part of this tower is jumping off the rocks to the first platform to save a few seconds. At the top of that tower, we pull our second lever, say hi to Johnny, and proceed to my favorite part of the Balboa route, the Big Yeet. By lining ourselves up with this pointed notch in the island, we are perfectly aligned with a path below. And because you never take more than 50 points of fall damage in Raft, all I have to do is take a leap of faith to run to the next tower. Then I can quickly Skyrim horse my way around the left side of the fence that's supposed to prevent you from doing this, and climb the final Balboa radio tower. And with that final tower turned on, we've finished Balboa Island and need to start making our way to the next story island. Up until now, we've had a massive lead on the timer for where I would normally be in a hard any percent run, but that's all about to go downhill very quickly. We're on our way to the 4th story island, Caravan Town, and that's the first location we need detail planks for. As I mentioned at the start of this video, I'm only using detail planks where we would normally build to achieve a speed strat. Otherwise, we would have hit this bottleneck a long time ago. And because no large islands have spawned in my direction of travel, I now have to purposely seek out at least 2 large islands to go back and forth between to buy bait and level up my trading reputation. Each trading post has 5 groups of 4 bait for sale, for a total of 20 bait per level per trading post. To level up to Tier 2 trading, you need 300 reputation points, which requires 30 Tier 1 fish, as they only give 10 reputation points when sold. That means visiting 2 islands to get to Tier 2, then going back and forth again to buy the bait for fish for Tier 2, which requires 3,000 reputation points, but Tier 2 fish give 100 reputation points per fish. So instead of heading directly to Caravan Town, here we are going back and forth while fishing to unlock the detail plank in the first place. At the end of Balboa Island, we were more than 15 minutes ahead of my hard split. But this process of unlocking the detail planks took a whopping 40 minutes, putting us roughly 22 minutes behind the timer, having lost all of our accumulated lead to this process. But will the mechanical strengths of the detail plank be enough to make up that difference as we use it in story islands? To speedrun Caravan Town in a standard run, assuming you're not doing frame manipulated jumps, you just build a big ramp that allows you to access the infirmary without a zipline. Then you sail around the island with that same ramp to reach the mayor's office. We'll be using that exact same strat, but with detail planks instead of roof pieces. This is where it's important to factor in the additional cost of detail planks when compared to the traditional building pieces. The detail plank costs 10 wooden planks to make 5 detail planks, at a cost ratio of 2 to 1. The detail plank can stretch slightly further than a normal roof piece, which costs 3 leaves and 2 planks to build, as well as being at an adjustable angle. The angle is both a blessing and a curse. For one, it allows you to exactly aim where you'd like to go. The downside is that if you're not careful with these angles, it's easy to build a ramp that's too steep to walk on and doesn't achieve the full length necessary to outweigh traditional building pieces. So instead of using a ramp that is 23 roof pieces long with a known height and length in a set direction, I'll be using detail planks to bridge the necessary gap at a greater cost in wood planks. But the gist of the technique is the same whether you're using traditional roof pieces or detail planks, and the end result of the island is the same. We climb up to the infirmary on our ramp, grab the key through the window, then sail around to the mayor's office to unlock the black box and grab the code to Tangaroa. This part of the run is just getting from one island to another as fast as possible. Since I already have my engine down and headed for Tangaroa, I'm busy in the water continuing to grab all of the planks that we'll need for later on. Once we reach Tangaroa, the second use of the detail plank ramp presents itself. I need to use a ramp at a specific angle combined with wave action to push myself through the base of the golf ball to gain access to the main area of Tangaroa. This is a lot easier said than done, because the same collision you're trying to use to phase through a wall desperately does not want you to phase through a wall, and thus will try to knock you off your ramp at any opportunity. It can be done though with some patience or some skill. Alternatively, a normal speedrun would again use that roof ramp with a flat floor and any piece of furniture on the end to skip this part. We use this method instead of the detail planks because it is guaranteed to work. You won't get knocked into the water, and you don't need the waves to line up just right to let you through. All it takes is a chair or a bathtub, and you are going to clip through the wall instantly to continue the run. But now that I'm inside using the detail plank method, we'll use another third-person camera glitch to open the main elevator tower door like we did at the yacht island, ride up the elevator, and enter the code to send the bridge flying, and go retrieve the code for Varuna Point. Theoretically, Varuna Point would be the strongest contender for using the detail plank above other methods, because of the plank's ability to ignore underwater physics and negate the need for finding air pockets. But theory isn't always reality, and I'll show you why the detail plank isn't viable even for this location. Because no building is required for Varuna Point speed strats, we'll accelerate the process of getting there just like we have for other islands. In my not-so-humble opinion, Varuna Point has the dumbest speedrun route, where instead of dealing with the island at all, you just swim down to the double doors on the shorter tower, do a crouch jump up through the ceiling behind this pipe, walk through to the other side of the wall, hop back into the water, and go through another pipe, and you have completed this island. Just grab the Temperance code and swim out. It really is that simple. So, off to Temperance we go. This big snowy island also doesn't require any building techniques, so we'll do the normal speedrun routing here as well. To do that, we grab a snowmobile and drive to the observatory. We carefully run around the side where the sinkhole appears to reach the door, and just like other locations, we manipulate our camera in third person to make the game think we're inside and open the door, allowing us easy access to the locker upstairs. Now you could enter a code here like a normal person, or you could again lower your camera inside and grab the key that way. With the key in hand, we're heading straight to the reactor, no blowtorch necessary, because, you guessed it, we're going to use yet another camera glitch to insert the Celine key without melting the ice. After the door is all the way open, it's time for my favorite speedrun glitch in the game. In the open doorway, we place ourselves in the center of the frame while running at the wall, then quickly save and exit the game. In the menu, we reload the same save we just quit out of, which spawns us inside the door because the door opening animation plays every time the save is loaded. When we're inside the door, we hold W against the wall we're facing, And if I did this right, it will pop us through the wall and straight into the final room of the island. If you do it incorrectly, it just places you on one side of the door, so you reload your old save and try again. But fortunately, I did get this right, so we just grabbed the code to Utopia, say hi to Shogo, and unstuck back to our raft. With the Utopia code entered, it's just a matter of avoiding icebergs and ensuring we have enough planks to last through the last leg of this run. And finally, we see the beginnings of skyscrapers appearing on the horizon, indicating that we are finally approaching Utopia, the last story location and the end of our journey. Here, I am specifically aiming for this tall building with a balcony where Olaf is hiding. Then it's just a matter of making the world's tallest and jankiest ramp up to the top of this building, because for some reason, this particular ceiling doesn't actually have collision and you can fall right through it. So we avoid the mess of potential collision errors that we couldn't avoid at Tangaroa. The traditional method here is quite similar, with a big ramp and a piece of furniture to float through the wall. Regardless of which method to enter the building you use, either floating in on a bathtub or falling through the ceiling causes Olaf to be rightfully quite afraid of you, and fall backwards out of this window, where we can grab his master key and perform one last glorious leap of faith over the balcony all the way down to the main building where all of the Utopian citizens are. Then we unlock this door. That triggers the final cutscene and marks the end of our speedrun. In grand total, this detail plank run took 3 hours, 34 minutes, and 38 seconds, which is about 28 minutes over my any % hard world record. Again, hard is a much slower category than the difficulty we actually ran in, which means that this run was actually about an hour longer than it should have been due to the detail planks. And for anyone who still doubts whether or not you could ever conceivably use the detail plank to speedrun Raft with any kind of efficiency, I invited my good friend Vexcitement to attempt a co-op run with me under the same rules as my solo run. Generally speaking, co-op runs tend to be a good 30 minutes faster than solo times, but as you might imagine based on my previous results, this run was still quite slow. Sadly, most of that footage for that run was corrupted, but I do stream this kind of challenge live over on Twitch if any of this was of interest to you. Anyways, I think that conclusively proves that no, you cannot speedrun Raft using the detail planks. The established speed strats will always be faster, and we run that way for a reason. That being said, this was a fun challenge, and I enjoyed running in a way that I hadn't done before. As always, let me know if you have any comments, questions, or concerns down below. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps me out. I hope to see you all again soon, but until then, have a great day.